Hi, everyone. And thank you so much, Zoho, for this wonderful opportunity of conducting this webinar on e-invoicing. Since in May, this notification has come where it has been announced that e-invoicing will now be applicable where businesses where the turnover exceeds 5 crore rupees. It's applicable to a lot of businesses now. So it's come right down from 500 crores to 5 crores. So it becomes really essential for you to know what is e-invoicing, why are we going to do e-invoicing, who is required to do e-invoicing, and when does it apply to you, and when exactly are you required to do e-invoicing. We'll also be discussing the applicability of e-invoicing, which sectors are exempted, which documents are exempted from e-invoicing, what is the process flow, what are you doing currently, and how much is that going to change after e-invoicing becomes applicable. We'll also look at QR code generation, what is a QR code under e-invoicing, and what are the essential parameters that need to be filled in for this QR code to be generated. We'll also see e-invoice enablement. So you can check whether or not e-invoice is actually enabled for your organization. And we'll also discuss some general provisions around e-invoicing. So let's begin right away. Okay. First, we'll talk about introduction to e-invoicing. That is, what is e-invoicing? But even before we go to what is e-invoicing, you would notice that since the advent of GST in 2017, the government is trying to, they're trying to automate everything when it comes to GST. Initially, GSTR1 and GSTR3B were not linked to each other because we were in the starting phase of implementation and they couldn't do it right away. But a couple of years down the line, and then they could integrate GSTR1 and 3B. So today, your 1 and 3B go hand in hand. They have to match with each other. By way of introducing e-invoicing, they're going a step further. They're trying to automate right from the step of your accounting software. So the process flow for them would be such that from your accounting software, it will push to GSTR1, and then from GSTR1 to GSTR3B. So this is like an entire circle of transaction. And if there is anywhere, if there is a mismatch or if there's any revenue leakage at any point, they will be able to catch hold of it easily. So that is mainly why they've introduced e-invoicing. So e-invoicing doesn't just mean an invoice in a PDF, but it means that it is a digital document that is exchanged between a buyer and supplier. But before being exchanged between the buyer and supplier, it goes to the government portal. It is a system where B2B invoices have to be authenticated electronically, and only then they can be used by the seller to issue it to the buyer. Okay. It also means that certain reporting details of specified GST documents are to be notified on the government portal. So e-invoicing is not just a digital invoice. It means that your invoice is first going to go to the government portal, and then from the government portal, you will get it back, and then only you can issue it to your buyer. But why do you actually need e-invoicing? Now, when you file your GSTR1, you're giving information to the government, let's say, on a monthly basis. But now, by way of e-invoicing, the government requires you to give this data on a real-time basis. So as soon as you've generated an invoice, the government would expect you to push it to the e-invoicing portal before issuing it to the buyer. So they're getting the data of all the taxpayers on a real-time basis. So that is a major reason e-invoicing is introduced. What happens if you're giving data on a real-time basis? You are less likely to make changes to these invoices. Okay. If there are people where there have been such cases of fake invoicing, they can be reduced or curbed because I've already, at the time of creating the invoice, informed the government that this invoice is created. So this is also one of the reasons. And also that all the information in your GST returns can get pre-filled by way of e-invoicing. So when you're pushing it to the government portal, that portal will automatically push it to your GSTR1. So you don't have to necessarily push those invoices where e-invoice is created. You don't have to upload them again. Okay. So these are some of the reasons why e-invoicing is introduced. Majorly, one of the major factors is so that they can curb fake invoicing. And as you know, GSTR 1 and 3B are linked with each other. So your customer can take credit of the bill that you've uploaded only if it appears in GSTR 2B. So now by way of e-invoicing, this circular loop also gets completed. It could be that not today, but a few years down the line, the department is coming up with notices and you have not done invoicing for your organization, your customer could be denied credit just because for you, e-invoicing was applicable and you did not do e-invoicing. So this is very essential. If it is applicable to you, you must start e-invoicing from 1st of August. Now, if you see the globe, like the global implementation of e-invoicing, there are a lot of countries that are adopting e-invoicing because it's very transparent and tax efficient. It also enables the business or taxpayers to interact among themselves with their customer, with the government. And also, if you realize, invoice is the base of your business, right? I mean, that is the place from where that is the first step you take towards information that I have sold these goods or I'm providing these services to this particular seller and I am eligible to get some money out of this transaction. So this is the absolute base point where all the transactions begin, and that is what they're trying to tap. If you see globally, e-invoicing has now in India, it's in the implementation stage, and up to 5 crores is getting implemented from 1st August. In a few other countries, the mandate has come and it will be implemented in the coming years. Of course, in India, we've not been given as much time as compared to the other countries, but it is what it is, and we have to do e-invoicing now. Now, who will generate an e-invoice? Now, in case of an e-way bill, anyone can generate. Anyone meaning either the supplier or the recipient or the transporter. These are the three parties to the transaction. But in case of e-invoice, only the supplier or the e-commerce operator can generate, right? Of course, because the supplier is issuing the invoice, the rights are with the supplier to generate the e-invoice. The recipient cannot generate the e-invoice and no one else can. In case of e-commerce operator, there are exceptional cases where e-commerce operator would be required to generate e-invoice because there are so many sellers registered with e-commerce operators. That is why the onus is on them and they can generate e-invoice. But otherwise, it will always be the supplier. Now, if you look at the phase-wise implementation as to how e-invoice was implemented, it started right from October 2020, where businesses above 500 crores were required to issue e-invoices. Then it went down to 100 crores in Jan 2021, 50 crores in April 21, 20 crores in April 22, 5 crores, 10 crores in October 2022, and 5 crores in August 2023. This is the sixth phase of the implementation that we're talking about. Now, we come to the main question. Who is this e-invoicing applicable to? When we keep saying turnover, what does this turnover actually mean? Now, first, when is e-invoicing applicable? It's applicable only when the aggregate turnover of any financial year, right from 2017-18 to 2023, exceeds rupees 5 crores. So in these 6 years, if the turnover has exceeded 5 crores, only then e-invoicing is applicable to you. But please note, this says aggregate turnover. What do you mean by aggregate turnover? Aggregate turnover would mean turnover of your taxable supplies, exempt supplies, exports, and also supplies between two distinct persons having the same PAN. Meaning, I have more than one registration. One is in Maharashtra, one is in Tamil Nadu, and they are exchanging invoices, goods between each other. So our transactions, in this case also, this particular total is also to be considered for calculating the aggregate turnover. So you'll consider everything. You consider taxable supplies, exempt supplies, exports, and supplies between distinct persons to calculate this aggregate turnover. So if your question is that I have more than one PAN, but in Maharashtra, my turnover doesn't exceed 5 crores, but in Tamil Nadu and Maharashtra together, if I put them together, it exceeds 5 crores, then yes, e-invoicing is applicable to you, right? So you need to find out You need to calculate for the last 6 years, and if any of the years your turnover has exceeded 5 crores, e-invoicing becomes applicable. Now, what are the documents to which e-invoicing will be applicable? Now, documents to which e-invoices will be applicable will be the B2B invoices that you're issuing, the B2B credit notes that you're issuing, the B2B debit notes that you're issuing. B2B is nothing but business to business. Okay. So if you're supplying to a registered person under GST and you're issuing an invoice, a credit note, or a debit note, e-invoicing is applicable, which means you have to upload the invoice to the government portal for all such transactions. E-invoicing also applies to exports, applies to deemed exports, also applies to supply by SEZ developers. Does not apply to SEZ units, but applies to SEZ developers. And it applies to supply to government or PSUs. So if it's a B2G transaction, that is business to government, even in those cases, e-invoicing is applicable. Now, of course, in this case, invoices, debit note, and credit note would mean all the invoices, debit note, and credit note that are issued by the supplier. So from a supplier's perspective, one, you're issuing an invoice. Two, you want to reduce the value of the invoice, so you're issuing a credit note. Three, you want to increase the value of the invoice or increase the value of the supply, so you're issuing a debit note. So in all such cases, e-invoicing is applicable. But there are still some exemptions from e-invoicing. Now, the one major exemption, if you see here, I have not included B2C suppliers. B2C is nothing but business to consumer. The reason is pretty straightforward. The government wants to track most of the transactions between businesses so that wherever input tax credit is involved, wherever the customer is taking credit of the transactions, such transactions can be tracked and there is a proper circular loop and fake invoicing can be avoided. So B2C, that is business to consumer, they're not interested because in any case, B2C transaction, the consumer is paying the entire GST on that transaction. So there's no loss of revenue as such. Now, that is why B2C are exempt. And even in case of issuance of delivery challans, CEO issuing delivery challans for supply on approval basis, you don't have to do e-invoicing. If you're issuing a delivery challan for job work, even in that case, e-invoicing is not applicable. As you would know, especially in case of job work, you would know that e-way bill is still applicable, but e-invoicing will not be applicable. Which are the sectors that are exempted? There are sectors, one is SEZ units. SEZ units don't have to, the e-invoicing provisions will not apply to SEZ units. It won't apply to insurance, banking, goods transport agency, passenger transport agency, and multiplex cinema admissions. Reason is pretty clear. All these sectors mostly deal with B2C, that is business to consumer, and that is why they have been exempted from applicability of e-invoicing. Now, how do you actually issue an invoice? What is the entire process? Now, currently, how do you issue an invoice? On your accounting software, you are raising an invoice and sending that invoice to your buyer. This invoice is on the basis of a pre-agreed PO agreement, whatever may be the case, and that is why you're sending it to the buyer. Of course, you're also signing it or maybe digitally signing it and sending it. Now, after e-invoice applies to you, there will be an additional step that you will have to follow. What is the additional step? This invoice or the details of this invoice have to be uploaded on the government portal, that is the invoice reference portal. Okay. Now, this IRP, that is the government portal, you'll upload all these invoices, and after you've uploaded, it will issue an IRN, that is an invoice reference number. This IRN will be unique to your invoice. And after you have received the invoice from the IRP, there will be a QR code that will appear on your invoice. So the QR code will have all the details of the invoice, right? So you're pushing the invoice to the government portal or you're uploading the invoice to the government portal, and e-invoice is generated where an IRN will be generated, that is an invoice reference number. And you will get back the invoice. On the invoice, there will be a QR code and an IRN. Only then you can issue the invoice to the buyer. So before issuing the invoice to the buyer, you must ensure that the IRN is generated and you have a QR code on that invoice. only then it will be treated as valid invoice. This is also as per Rule 48 of the CGST rules. Now, so the process flow will be something like this. You have a customer PO. So you're raising a PO. The customer is raising a PO. Based on the purchase order, you've created an invoice. Then you're uploading the invoice to the IRP by using the JSON format, or you're using your accounting software in whichever way it helps you. After my session, the Zoho team will also explain how you can use Zoho to push these invoices to IRP. Then you will receive the e-invoice with an IRN, that is an invoice reference number. Your e-way bill, part A, will be generated automatically based on this IRN. You will file, then you can file your GSTR1. Again, in GSTR1, wherever you've created e-invoices, everything gets pulled automatically. So all the data where e-invoicing is applicable and you've generated e-invoices is auto-populated in your GSTR1. You will just have to add the other details. Let's say B2C is applicable, your HSN table, the documents issued, everything else needs to be put in. And then you can also file your GSTR 3B. So this will complete the entire loop of right from the accounting software to GSTR 3B so that there's no revenue loss. Now, like I said, a QR code will be generated once you've pushed it on the government portal and you receive it back from the portal. Now, this QR code will have all the details of your invoice. So if you scan the code, so if any tax official also scans the code, they can easily access all these details of the invoice. GSTN of the supplier, GSTN of the recipient, invoice number of the supplier, date of invoice, invoice value, the number of line items, the HSN details, the IRN. All this can be easily understood by if you scan the invoice with the QR code. Okay. There are some general provisions when it comes to e-invoicing. Now, once an e-invoice is generated, it is valid for 24 hours, as in it can be cancelled within 24 hours. Okay. If you want to make any changes to your invoice after 24 hours, let's say, the recipient got the invoice, but the recipient after a couple of days tells you that, this and this is charged extra. Could you please amend this? You cannot go back and amend that invoice. You can't edit and make changes there. You will instead have to issue a credit note against that invoice to reduce the value of the invoice, or a debit note to increase the value of the invoice. And the respective debit note and credit note will also have to be uploaded on the e-invoicing portal. Okay. But if you're doing it within 24 hours, you can still cancel that particular IRN and then generate a new one. So you can push the transaction again on the e-invoicing portal. That's why I said e-invoice cannot be amended and you need to have a credit note or debit note. Currently, there is no time limit for generating on e-invoice. So you might ask me that, listen, I've generated my invoice today. Do I need to upload it immediately to e-invoice? Now, if you ask me the intention of the government, absolutely. The intention is that they want the details of the invoice on a real-time basis. Okay. But as of now, there is no law that is going to tell you that, you need to generate it within 7 days or within 10 days or whatever. So as of now, you can generate it up to filing of your GSTR1. That is a normal understanding. But of course, the intention of the government is not that. The intention is that they want it on real-time basis. So very recently, a notification was also issued where they wanted to, give the time limit of 7 days where the turnover exceeds 100 crores, but they rescinded that notification and it's no more. I mean, they had to resign it. So as of now, there is no time limit, but it is suggested that you do it on a real-time basis. Sometimes you might say that, I'm an exporter and my shipping bill comes in a couple of days, and after I've entered those details, I want to push. Shipping bill details are ideally not mandatory in case of e-invoicing, but if you would want to do that, you would want to wait for a couple of days that add the shipping bill details, then push to the government portal so that in your GSTR1 everything gets auto-populated correctly. Even that is fine for now because there is no time limit. So you might ask me that how do I know whether e-invoicing is applicable to my organization? Of course, GST is a self-assessment tax. So you have to calculate it on your own whether or not it's applicable to you, checking your turnover for the last 6 years. But if you still want to check, you can go to the e-invoice portal. So you just have to log into this portal. You just have to visit this website, einvoice1.gst.gov.in. Under search, you go to e-invoice status of taxpayer, and you just put your GSTIN there to check whether e-invoicing has been enabled for you or not. Mind you, this is just a facility that is given to you. It could be that, let's say I come from the exempted sector, and I'm checking on this portal, and the portal actually says it's applicable to you. But as per the law, I am a goods transport agency, or I'm a passenger transport agency, or I'm a multiplex where it's not really applicable. So in that case, it won't apply to you. This is just a facility. But on the other hand, if you're checking and you find out that it's applicable, and until today you were thinking it may not apply because of the turnover limits, I would suggest you go back and check your turnover. It is likely that maybe it actually applies to you. Okay. So don't take this as a rule of hand, but use this as a facility to check whether e-invoicing has been enabled. And then if you feel that no, but it's actually applicable to me, I want to apply for voluntary enablement, there's also an option again on the same website. You go to registration, e-invoice enablement, and you can put your GSTIN and get invoicing enabled for your organization. So of course, the main criteria remains that your aggregate turnover in any of the preceding financial years from 2017-18 to 2022-23 should exceed 5 crore rupees. Only then e-invoicing becomes applicable. I think Chitra is going to take forward from here.
So thank you so much, Nikita, for that wonderful session on explaining about e-invoicing in detail and also how it impacts the businesses in India. Now, moving further, we will be seeing how e-invoices can be generated from Zoho Books. So before we get started, Zoho Books is a GSP, which is we are a GST Suvidha provider, and you'll be able to integrate Zoho Books with the IRP quickly. So what you can do is you'll be able to generate invoices from Zoho Books, and you can push it to the IRP on a click of a button. And in return, you'll be getting the details like the IRN, the QR code, the acknowledgement number, and the acknowledgement date. So these details can be affixed against the respective invoice, and you can choose to send this invoice to your customers directly from Zoho Books. So without any further delay, let me quickly share my screen. So we will see how you can register in the e-invoicing portal, how you can connect Zoho Books with the e-invoicing portal, and finally, how you can push the invoices from Zoho Books to generate e-invoices. So let me share my screen. So to get started with, e-invoicing is going to be basically a 3-step process. The first step is you need to register in the invoice registration portal. So you can log into the invoice registration portal, and under the registration tab, you can select portal login. So here you need to enter your GSTIN number of your business, and a CAPTCHA will be displayed. You can enter the CAPTCHA and click on go. So once you enter your GSTIN number, your business details like the address, the city, the PIN number, all those details will be auto-populated. You can verify them, and then you can proceed to click on send OTP. So this will generate an OTP which will be sent to your registered mobile number. You can enter that OTP and you can verify this. So once you have done this verification, it will ask you to create a username and password. So once you create a username and password, this will complete the first step of registering your business in the invoice registration portal. If in case in your business you are already creating e-way bills, then you can actually skip this step because you can use the same username and password to log in into the invoice registration portal directly. So we have completed the first step where you can register yourself in the invoice registration portal. The second step is to enable e-invoicing in Zoho Books. So for that, what you can do, like we believe you would have created an account in Zoho Books. Under settings and preferences, you'll be able to see an option for e-invoicing. So from this e-invoicing section, click on the enable e-invoicing option. So it'll ask you under what bucket, like under which revenue your business falls in. You can select the respective option from here, enter from which date you'll be generating e-invoices, and you can enable e-invoicing in your Zoho Books organization. So this completes the second step for us. where we have enabled e-invoicing in Zoho Books. The next step is to establish a connection between the e-invoicing portal and Zoho Books. So for this, you need to once again log in into your e-invoicing portal like the IRP, and you'll be able to find an option called as API registration from the menu. So click on API registration and select Create API User. So once you select this option, you'll be able to see a window similar to this, but you need to select through GSP, and the GSP must be selected as Zoho Corporation. So please select Zoho Corporation and once again create a username and password. So this username and password is what will help you in connecting Zoho Books to the IRP. So in the beginning, we already mentioned the username and password. That is to log in into the invoice registration portal. The username and password that we enter now, it is to establish a connection between Zoho Books and the IRP. So please enter a username and password. You can re-enter the password and be done with this particular step. So once you're done this, you need to once again come back to Zoho Books. And in Zoho Books, against your respective GSTI number, you'll be having an option called as Connect Now. So you need to click on this Connect Now button, and you need to enter the same username and password which we entered just now. So enter the same username and password and click on Save and Validate. So this details will be validated, and once it is successfully verified, it will connect Zoho Books to your invoice registration portal. So far what we discussed is creating an account in IRP. The second thing, enabling e-invoicing in Zoho Books. The third thing, how you have to select Zoho Corporation as your GSP. And by using the same username and password, you can connect Zoho Books to the invoice registration portal. So having seen the initial steps, now we will see how you can create e-invoices from Zoho Books. So before that, you can configure templates in Zoho Books. So templates is a section where you'll be able to configure the look and feel of your invoices. So you can choose whichever template you're using. You can edit the particular template. And in the footer section here, you'll be having the options on which e-invoicing details you want to be included in your invoice. So you can choose only IRN or QR code. And if you do not want to include this, you can enable it or disable it as your preference, and you can save this. So once you've configured your template in this way, you can move forward, start creating invoices from Zoho Books, and we can push it to the invoice registration portal for generating e-invoices. So we will now see how to create an invoice. So to create an invoice in Zoho Books, you can come to the sales module, and under that, you'll be having a section called as invoices. So from here, you can create a new invoice. You can select the customer name for whom you're creating the invoice. And you need to ensure that the billing address contains all the relevant details like the street name, the state, the PIN code, and also the GST details are perfectly configured. And also ensure that the invoice number and invoice date are present because these are mandatory fields. And you can scroll down and select the goods or service for which you're billing your customer for. So you can select the like the item details. And as you see, the HSN code, the rate, the tax percentages are populated. So ensure all these details are available and you can save an invoice. So this is how quickly you'll be able to create an invoice from Zoho Books. And once the invoice is created, you can directly push it to the IRP. So as you see on top, there is a push to IRP button. You can just click on this push to IRP. And here it will ask you whether you want to push only the invoicing details or you want to generate both an e-invoice as well as e-payables. So based on your preference, you can select the respective option. So if you have successfully entered all the details, the invoice will be successfully pushed to the IRP and you'll be getting the status as pushed. And if you scroll down the respective invoice and see, you'll be able to see the QR code, the IRN, the acknowledgement number and acknowledgement date. So these details will be automatically affixed against the invoice. So just in case certain data is not available, like if there is a mismatch in any character limit or certain data is not perfectly present, then the status will be reflected as failed. And also it will show you for what reason this invoice is not successfully pushed to the IRP. So you can make the changes as suggested and you can re-push this data to the e-invoicing portal once again. And as we discussed during the session, if you want to cancel the e-invoice, that can actually be done within the 24 hours limit. So let us say for this invoice, I've already pushed it to the IRP. So as you see here, there is a cancel e-invoice button. So if within 24 hours you want to cancel this invoice, that can be directly done from Zoho Books. You can click on cancel invoice, mention, like select the reason why you're canceling this, mention the remarks, and you can cancel the invoice directly from here. But just in case the 24-hour limit has lapsed, so you need to go to the GST portal directly and you need to cancel the invoice there. And once you do it, here you'll be able to see an option called as mark as cancelled. So you can click on mark as cancelled. So that will update the status in Zoho Books. Like it will void the respective invoice. You can create a new invoice and repush it once again to the IRP. And not just this, we have various views to check which invoices have been pushed. So as you see, we have the pushed for e-invoicing view, yet to be pushed, and failed on e-invoicing. So for example, if I filter out this yet to be pushed for e-invoicing, so you can even bulk select these invoices and you can push it to the IRP in one go. So it is not just like every individual invoice has to be pushed separately. If you want to bulk push these invoices, that can also be done using this option where you can bulk select the invoices and push it together to the IRP. And and not just invoices, even if you want to push credit notes or debit notes, that can also be done directly from Zoho Books. So this is how you'll be able to create an invoice in Zoho Books, and you can push it to the IRP for generating the invoices. And also you can have a control on who is generating e-invoice for your organization. So under settings, we have this users and roles section, and you can configure a role where you can define. So once you mention a role name, you can give the access only to specific people who can push this and who can cancel the invoice from your Zoho Books. So based on the access provided, only those employees will be able to perform this activity, and this option will not be available to the other users in your Zoho Books organization. And also, if you have recurring transactions in your business, you raise recurring invoices. So in that case, we have an option where you can not only just create recurring invoice, but you can even create it, push it to the e-invoicing portal, and the invoicing details will be generated, and it can be automatically sent to your customers as well. So if you're into a subscription-based business where you have recurring transactions in place, you can automate the process where the invoice will be created, pushed, and it will be sent to your customers. So this is to give you an overall idea on how you can use Zoho Books to connect to the IRP and how you can generate e-invoices from Zoho Books on the click of a button.